All right, how's it going, everybody? All right, so today we're going to continue with the Kerry Thornley Files, Part 7. Right. So, we've already gone through a good chunk of these files. Now we're starting to get into some weird stuff, some stuff that might not seem to apply to Kerry Thornley right off the bat, but it does, of course. So, um, all right, so without further ado, this is again from the Garrison files. The file indicated thornley.pdf. It's available at archive.org if you'd like to read along with me in your book. Mrs. Kakowski, September 16th, 1966, interview with Salandria and Josiah Thompson. Josiah Thompson, famous for writing the classic 6 Seconds in Dallas. B told Mrs. Kakowski he was going to get a job which paid $17,500 a month with a management firm in the Midwest. This was about a month before the assassination. He wasn't sure whether he would take it. He had a high-powered rifle. He was a good shot. His nickname was Turk. Not sure of the significance of that. If I'm not mistaken, Igor Vaganov went by the name of Turk also. He tried to get into civilian defense with Robert Bryant, who used to head it. Robert Bryant, former civil defense head, lives at 72 Dutton Mill Road, Green Ridge, TR4-1003. Van Bitch, Oldsmobile dealer in media known to him. He was always buying things from him. Turk drives a 1956 white Oldsmobile. So the 1956 white Oldsmobile might be significant because after the assassination, there was a white Oldsmobile station wagon that was seen driving around with guys with guns getting out of it and whatnot. So might be some significance there. FBI man said when he interviewed us immediately after the assassination that B was armed and we should watch him. He, according to the FBI, has suicidal tendencies. Again, not sure who they're talking about, the initial B. After the assassination, he made 2 trips back and forth from Dallas. He picked up a new car. He gave Garone a bad check and got a 1963 Corvette Stingray. Robert Bryant interview with Salandria. B never drank. He was boastful. Frank Willis, 42 Green Lane, Green Ridge. I'm assuming Texas. His radio in the car was a brand new Citizens Band radio. Okay, so if you'll recall, Lee Bowers, the Tower Man, saw a station wagon, a white station wagon, drive into the railroad yard before the assassination, and he thought it looked like the man, who was a younger man in his 20s, was talking on a radio inside the car, like he was holding something up to his face, like he was talking into it. And so now we have a document where Garrison seems to have identified an Oldsmobile, a 1956 white Oldsmobile, possibly a station wagon. I'm inclined to believe this is a station wagon, and it says that there is a radio in the car. So this seems like it'd be extremely significant in as far as identification of the vehicle that was used by whomever leading up to the assassination in the minutes before. All right. So after the assassination, he used to hang around with Gino Cucciria, 176 Fifth Avenue, Valley Green. Mrs. Kakowski, September 3rd, 1961. He read Mein Kampf and used to talk against Jews and Negroes. He was always getting money, but where did he get it? Martha, his wife, had a grandmother who lived near Dallas. FBI questioned him about the assassination. FBI found his clothes and belongings in a telephone booth somewhere in Texas 6 months or a year after the assassination. FBI didn't ask hardly anything of us. They just listened. Joe and Anthus, Ann's sister, went to Dallas twice to pick up Ann. This is some interesting stuff. This I'm going to have to revisit for sure. Mrs. Kukowski continued. He is 6'4", real thin, 170, 180 pounds, sandy hair, not too much hair. His father was killed in the war. His mother remarried. He came to the U.S. from Russia via Germany when he was 7 years old. John Anthus said he was reading Mein Kampf and talked about all the things which were right about the book. Anne wonders now whether he was mixed up in the assassination. FBI questioned Anne and B separately. B drove back from Dallas to Philadelphia the same day as the assassination. He rattled on and on about the $17,500 a month job. He acted like he was real important and big. It seems funny why he left his job with GE. Why is this person going unidentified by Garrison? I don't understand. And September 23rd, 66, on the phone with Salandria, called her mother, and mother let Salandria talk to her. In Dallas, he always went out at 7 a.m. in the morning and came back at 6. I thought he was taking dope. He had red marks on his arm. His eyes were always the same, like one look or one stare. He remained home at the apartment the day of the assassination. He never told me anything about the assassination. He never told me why we were going to Dallas. When the president was shot, he was at home. A short guy visited 2 days or a day before the assassination and asked to see B. B wasn't home. The landlady said he was a short, stocky, and older man. I did not see him. Tink Thompson stated the landlady did not see this man. Perhaps Anne is lying and she actually was the one who saw him. I was surprised when he said he was going to leave Dallas. He told me this after the assassination. The reason why I called Ann Anthus was because I thought that he was going to kill himself or me on the day of the assassination. Garland, Texas is 7 miles from Dallas. He had $8,000 when he went to Texas. He cashed some checks. Why did he stop at Bill Autry? That was on the way down. He said that he was there because he had worked for Bill Autry. After the assassination, he left for an hour. He said he was going to the bank. Then later, the landlady came back while B was away and said Tippett was killed. When Tippett was killed, I had B's pistol. We turned on the TV after the president was assassinated. He stayed for 5 minutes and then he went out. He said he had to, and then it cuts off. Interesting. I sense that there is some there. Statement of Alan Shear with reference to his being a student of David Ferry's flight school. I met David Ferry on June 5th of 66 at Saturn Aviation, which is located at the New Orleans airport. I was looking for an instructor to teach me flying. Dave was employed by Al Crouch, who owned Saturn Aviation. I flew with Dave from June until September of 66, and then Dave left Saturn Aviation and started his own school. I left Saturn with Dave because I had started with him and didn't want to change instructors. He has been my instructor until the time of his death. My last lesson was approximately 1 month before his death. I was scheduled to take my next lesson the Sunday before his death. My relationship with Dave was fairly close. I drove him home occasionally, and once we went out to eat. Once I went to his apartment, but didn't go in because it smelled. He talked plenty about one subject or another. Most of his talk didn't make any sense to me. He never talked to me about any Cubans or his knowledge, if he had any, of the presidential assassination. I knew and met Al Bobouf, Bert Johnson, Jimmy Johnson, and Alan Measle. I met and knew others whose names I cannot think of at this time. I haven't seen Al Bobouf in a couple of months. I am interested in getting my logbook which I believe was in David Ferry's house at the time of his death. From Jim Garrison's office, March 1st, 67, statement of John G. Villarubia, residing in New Orleans. I have lived in this neighborhood for all of my life. I have never been a member of the CAP, nor have I ever had even an interest in that type of activity. I do recall that approximately 14 years ago, one boy in the neighborhood by the name of Bobby Songy had some interest in flying. However, since I never went to the New Orleans airport and was not interested in flying, I have no further knowledge of his association with the CAP or any activity related thereto. I would like to further stipulate that I have never known, spoken to, or seen the late Captain Ferry or Guy Bannister. Have you ever had any occasion to meet Lee Harvey Oswald? No, sir, I have not. Do you know Guy Bannister? No, sir, I don't. I know of him to my recollection as a public official at one time, and I did not know him directly or indirectly. I show you a picture of a white male, namely one Leighton Martins. Do you know him? No, sir, I don't, and to the best of my recollection at this time, I have never even seen the subject in my lifetime. Do you know anyone that is or was affiliated with the CAP of your own knowledge, a Civil Air Patrol? No, sir, I do not, with the exception that possibly Bobby Songy was a member. However, I've never seen this man or any other of the boys in my neighborhood in a uniform, nor did I attend with them. To the extent of my knowledge, Bobby Songy had some interest in flying. So this guy apparently doesn't seem to know anything about anything. But it is in the Kerry Thornley file. And not even like at the end, like it's somewhere in the middle, right? So from Sergeant Fenner Sedgebeer to Louis Ivan, reference Roy Tell, white male, 28, Jefferson Parish, employed by Swift Company, Harvey, Louisiana. At about 3:15 p.m., Friday, February 24th, 67, I interviewed Roy Tell at his residence. Roy Tell stated that he has not heard from David Ferry since around New Year's 1967, at which time they exchanged greetings at the New Orleans airport. He explains that he had been closely associated with Ferry back in the 1950s, while he was the executive secretary in the Civil Air Patrol, the Moissant Division. He explains that Ferry was a devout Catholic and insisted that the boys attend their church. Ferry often referred the boys to Father Sebastian Argonello, who may be in New Orleans at this time, however, was located in Raceland, Louisiana, and was at Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Kenner, Louisiana. Ferry also referred to the Catholic Church as being communistic and talked about the merits of communism. Roy Tell remembered receiving a telephone call from Ferry shortly after the president's assassination, and Ferry explained to him that he was working with the FBI and was seeking information as to Oswald and also wanted to locate Edward Vobel and George Walters. Roy Tell remembered the name Oswald as being in the Civil Air Patrol, but could not place him. So, as far as I'm concerned, this statement from Roy Tell, remembering Oswald as having been in the Civil Air Patrol, this is the only corroboration that I have that Oswald was in the Civil Air Patrol, other than the known photograph of Oswald with David Ferry. Now, the reason I say that is because there was some scuttlebutt over whether Oswald was actually a member of the Civil Air Patrol or if he was just at that barbecue because he was a guest of Edward Vobel, who was his definitely confirmed friend in school. So, this is interesting. So, yes, this, for me, fills in a blank. Not a very important one, but a somewhat important one, right? Roy Tell remembered the name Oswald as having been in the Civil Air Patrol, but could not place him. He was going to check at his mother's house and see if he could find any old records or photographs relating to any of these individuals. The following individuals were named by Tell as having been closely associated with David Ferry: Oliver St. P., now in the Peace Corps somewhere in Asia; Larry Anderson, pilot for Delta Airlines; and Thomas Nation Compton III, possibly at Michaud. Ferry referred to Compton as an undisciplined genius. Compton is also the person whom Ferry stayed with throughout the weekend of November 22nd, seeing as how he didn't go to Houston. Melvin Coffey, that is a real person, but that name is just used as an alias by Leighton Martins on their trip to Dallas and whatnot. Gene and Richard Marshall. Gene is traveling as a musician, and Richard is working at Michaud. So Michaud is Michaud is a city, and there's a bunch of plants there for a bunch of intelligence networks and Lockheed, and there's a whole bunch of factories there, right? So you see Michaud referenced often. But why is David Ferry associated with all these guys who end up going to work at Michaud, right? Well, he must be some level of CIA recruiter, right? Interview with Perry Raymond Russo at Mercy Hospital, February 27, 1967. The Perry Russo stuff starts to get fascinating, and it took me a while to figure out what the fuck was actually going on there. And there still might be some more going on to Perry Russo and Sandra Moffat, who he's associated with. But where are we? So this is February 27, 67. This is early 67, so this is pretty fresh as to when Perry Russo connected with Jim Garrison. So, this seems to be a statement from Perry Russo. On February 27, 1967, Al Oser and I, after talking with Dr. Nicholas Chetta of the Orleans Parish Coroner's Office, took Perry Raymond Russo over to the Mercy Hospital, located on Bienville and Jefferson Davis Parkway. Present in the emergency ward operating room were Al Oser, Dr. Nicholas Chetta, Dr. James Wall, Dr. Richard Zapernik, Perry Russo, and myself. At this point, Dr. Chetta began getting Perry Russo ready to undergo sodium pentothal. What a fucking dumb move. After the preparations were over, Dr. Chetta and Dr. Wall began administering glucose into his arm, and at 3:28 p.m., the actual injection of sodium pentothal into Russo began. After a few minor questions, such as what was his name, where does he live, where does he work, and did he know other individuals, I got into the mainstream of questioning. Okay, so let me fill in the fucking blanks on what's going on here. So this is in the Kerry Thornley file for a very good reason. So in September of 1963, Perry Russo goes to the party at David Ferry's and allegedly, or was it at Clay Shaw's? Yeah, it might have been at Clay Shaw's. I don't fucking remember. Either way, it doesn't fucking matter because all these guys were there anyway. So David Ferry was there. Clay Shaw was there. Kerry Thornley was there and misidentified by Perry Russo as Leon Oswald, right? And so that is very significant. And the fact that Garrison thought to put this in the Thornley file just confirms that Garrison had the same suspicions that I did. And actually, it's not even a suspicion anymore. It's pretty slam dunk when you come to realize that Perry Russo describes Oswald as having been a bearded beatnik. And hopefully in the course of these documents here, I don't think they're actually in these documents. I think they're in the Perry Russo files, which we might get to sometime. But Perry Russo files actually indicated to me that he had met David Ferry's roommate, which that was the term he used to describe him, roommate, right? So it was a close relationship between Ferry and this person, which narrowed the lot down to one person, Kerry Thornley. And also he described him as a bearded beatnik, right? So the bearded beatnik, only fucking Kerry Thornley was the bearded beatnik, right? The question about the bearded beatnik statement, that was at what time was he a bearded beatnik and what time did he shave it off? Now, in the Kerry Thornley files, actually, we already talked about this in the past couple of days when he shaved his beard off, but that's when he told us he did, not necessarily when he did. But when you go through the Perry Russo statements, you come to realize that the person who he described as Leon Oswald is who he described as a bearded beatnik was not a bearded beatnik when he saw him at the party. At the party, he described him as having whiskers, meaning that he had shaved, but he had like 5 o'clock shadow, right? So to me, that was extremely significant. But also the fact that he knew him as a bearded beatnik through David Ferry, that doesn't get brought to light very much, and that completely just derails any concept that was Oswald. Oswald didn't interact with these fucking people. Oswald was handled. Oswald was kept out of Dallas. All of the sightings, or most of the sightings in New Orleans of Oswald were Kerry Thornley. And Garrison knew this, hence this is why he's lumping all this shit into the Kerry Thornley files, right? I bet you we go 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. There's no mention of Thornley. Hell, 36 of 96. I bet you let's see how far we can go before he actually mentions Kerry Thornley again. I bet it's pretty far. Because you don't need Thornley here, because he's describing events that he knows were Thornley that was described as Oswald or someone else, Leon Oswald in this particular case. So, present in the emergency ward, I already got to that. After a few questions, what was his name? Where does he live? Where does he work? Does he know any other individuals? I got into the mainstream of questioning. My first question pertained to his relationship with Al Landry. He said that Al Landry was a friend of his and that he had known him for 5 years. I asked him if he knew David Ferry, and he said yes. He knew David Ferry, and that he had first met him at Ferry's house in 1962. He said that it was through Al Landry that he had the occasion to come into contact with Ferry, as Ferry was queer and was in love with Al Landry. He said that Landry's mother had asked him to try and break their relationship, and that existed between Landry and Ferry, and that he thought that he would intercede and try to do this. He then began to tell of an event that he experienced at Ferry's apartment with Al Landry. He said that he went to Ferry's apartment near Kenner with Landry, and Ferry introduced him to his mother about 8 or 10 boys that were in the Civil Air Patrol unit of Ferry's. He said this was more or less an informal meeting, and Ferry took this occasion to demonstrate his hypnotic powers. He did this by using Al Landry as a subject. After putting him in a deep hypnotic trance, he began sticking pins into Landry's body, and Landry did not feel any pain whatsoever. He also said that Ferry used post-hypnotic suggestion on Landry. He also said that at one time Ferry had also hypnotized him, and that when he came out of it, he felt like a fool because everyone was laughing at what he had done under hypnosis. He did not remember what he had done, but whatever it was, it must have been funny because everybody was laughing at him. I then asked him if he remembered seeing any Cubans with Ferry, and he told me that he could remember when he was living on Elysian Fields Avenue, Ferry came to his apartment one day with 2 very thick husky Cubans. Ooh, here we go with husky Cubans. He said Ferry introduced them to him, but he couldn't remember their names because they were Spanish-sounding names. He could remember that they were very strong and rough-looking and that they did not speak any English. Yeah, I don't know if I believe that, because I'm believing that these husky fucking Latins were Lawrence Howard and Lauren Hall, because they had to have been intimately connected with Ferry's operation down there. And I can only very, very seldom put a man who matches Lawrence Howard's description, the husky Latino with the pockmarked face or had moles on his face, in the presence of David Ferry. So it's we know that he was in that group because, the way I see it, the Mauser 7.65 rifles that made their way to Lawrence Howard and Sergio Arcacha and Emilio Santana, who's a shooter at the Daltex, those rifles came down from Frank the Irishman Sheeran, right? Isn't that his name? And so who wrote that book, I Hear You Paint Houses, right? And so there was definitely the connection there, because that's how the rifles made their way from the source to Lawrence Howard and these guys. And so there's definitely that connection to Ferry there, and I can only place them in the presence, I can only place Lawrence Howard in the presence of Ferry through the statements of G. Ray Gill, and I fucking hate with a passion using the statements of mob people as fucking corroboration for goddamn anything, right? I hate saying, well, this guy lied over here, but he told the truth over there, right? Because I have to do that a couple times, and I hate it. So I'd like to minimize that as much as fucking possible. All right, so I then asked him if he remembered telling me in our previous interview in Baton Rouge that he went up to Ferry's apartment on Louisiana Parkway and met Ferry's roommate. He said that he did remember. And then I asked him to describe him. Oh, let me screenshot this real quick so I don't forget it. I asked him to describe him and tell me all that he could remember about his roommate. He said that he had seen the roommate on about 3 different occasions, okay? 3 different occasions in Ferry's apartment. So this is very fucking important because it was a solid identification, right? He knew this person had been living there in Ferry's apartment, and he'd seen him there at least 3 times. And he called him Leon, right? But if you listen to motherfuckers like Oliver Stone, they would have you believe that the only fucking time that Perry Russo ever met this Leon Oswald, who was supposed to be Lee Harvey Oswald, was at the party in David Ferry's in September. Bullshit. Bullshit, and fuck Oliver Stone to death, that fucking piece of shit, and his little fucking henchman, James Eugenio, that fucking traitor to his country who took money from a fucking Mossad spy, right? So fuck these people. He said that he had seen the roommate on about 3 different occasions in Ferry's apartment, and that Ferry at first told him that it was his roommate and called him Leon. He said Leon seems to be around 25 years old, and that what he noticed most about him, that he was very dirty and a beatnik type guy. Okay? Sure as shit. This is not... Okay, so this is the same person that Perry Russo will claim that he sees at the party in September 63. Same person. And he's describing him as very dirty and a beatnik type guy. Okay, fucking Oswald was clean as shit. Neat, tidy. Never a dirty ass beatnik, okay? It was not Oswald. So the testimony of fucking Perry Russo has zero evidentiary value as far as putting Oswald at David Ferry's house, right? But motherfuckers will try to use this as proof of the relationship between Ferry and fucking Oswald, and it drives me up a goddamn wall. This is so fucking important because it proves that it was Kerry Thornley. It proves to me, it's obvious it was Kerry Thornley. That's why this is important. Not because it was fucking Oswald. Fucking Jesus Christ. I swear to God, I fucking hate Kennedy researchers. They're the dumbest people on the fucking planet. I don't want that on my tombstone when I go. He said Leon seemed to be about 25 years old, and that he noticed most about him was a dirty-ass fucking beatnik. He said that the guy appeared to be a little nuts to him, and that he would never talk to anyone. Ferry had told him that he did not like to talk to anyone, and that he was a bug on history, and all he did was sit out on the porch in a rocking chair, and also he read a lot. He said that he remembered Ferry telling him that Leon was a real nut about guns, and Russo remembered one time as he went into the apartment, Leon was sitting on a chair with his leg up cleaning a rifle. He said the rifle had a telescopic sight mounted right on top of the rifle, and it was a bolt-action rifle. He also said that Leon had a pistol. Of course he did, because it was Kerry Thornley who was posing in the backyard photographs. I asked him, could he pinpoint the times that he saw the roommate with Ferry, and he said it was September 20th until around September 25th. I asked him, could he be sure of this? And he said he is pretty sure. He knows that it had to be in September. I then asked him if the picture that he had drawn up this morning in my office resembled Ferry's roommate, whom he referred to as Leon. And he said yes, the picture did. He said the roommate had a bushy beard and his hair was all messed up, and he was extremely dirty. He said the picture we had drawn up this morning was very, very close to Ferry's roommate, except that the guy was a little dirtier. He also said another thing he remembered at the roommate was that Oswald wore a wedding band on his left hand, and it appeared to be gold or brass. Okay, so let's stop and just take that little snippet. So he still thinks that this guy was Oswald. It was clearly not Oswald. It was Kerry Thornley, but Kerry Thornley was wearing this ring, a wedding ring, and it appeared to be gold or brass, but Kerry Thornley's not married at this time. Kerry Thornley ends up marrying Jeannie Hack, after the assassination, I believe? Maybe even 64? So, so he's wearing a wedding band when he's not married. Further, to set up Oswald. I then pointed out to him that he had referred to the roommate as Oswald and asked him if there was any particular why he now referred to Ferry's roommate as Oswald. He said that he didn't know, that he just seems to be what he was called or what somebody said his name was. I then returned, that's Salandria and the guy talking about Ferry, about Kerry Thornley's statements, just to clarify that. I then returned to talking about the picture of Lee Harvey Oswald and that he had added a beard to, and okay, so I then returned to talking about the picture of Lee Harvey Oswald that we had added a beard to and messed up his hair, and said that was very similar to how the roommate looked. He said that the guy did not talk to him, and when he asked the roommate where he was from, the roommate said everywhere. He said Ferry had told him that his roommate did not like to talk to people and did not even get along with Ferry's Cuban friends. I then asked him if he knew Clay Shaw. He said that he did not know Clay Shaw. This is Salandria referring to Perry Russo. Perry Russo says he does not know Clay Shaw. He said that he did not know Clay Shaw. I then asked him if he knew Clay Bertrand, and he said he did know a Bertrand, and he is a queer. Russo said that Ferry had introduced him to Bertrand while he was at Ferry's apartment on Louisiana Avenue. I then asked him to describe Clay Bertrand, and he said that Clay Bertrand was a tall man with white kinky hair, sort of a slender, and that he had seen Bertrand on 2 other occasions. Good stuff for when I get to Clay Shaw, which will be, I don't know, a couple books from now. I then asked him to describe Clay Bertrand, and he said Clay Bertrand was a tall man with white kinky hair, sort of slender, that he had seen Bertrand on 2 other occasions. One occasion when his car had some trouble and he pulled into Ferry's service station on the Veterans Highway. Ferry ends up owning a service station that he gets from money that he got from blackmailing Carlos Marcello, which is probably why he fucking ended up dead. He said he remembered Bertrand because Bertrand was hawking some kid who was not too far from him at Kennedy's speech. At Kennedy's speech. I don't know what he's talking about. I then asked him if he could remember any of the details about Clay Bertrand being up in Ferry's apartment, and he told me that he was in Ferry's apartment with Clay Bertrand and Ferry and the roommate, and he remembers Ferry telling him, "We are going to kill John F. Kennedy, and that it won't be long." He said Ferry again repeated his earlier statement that he could plan the perfect assassination of the president because he could fly anything that had wings on it, and he had perfectly availability exit out of the country. When I asked him who Ferry was referring to, he said, "We." He said, "I guess he was referring to the people in the room." He said this was not the first time that Ferry had talked to him about how easy it would be to assassinate the president. He said that Ferry in September and October of 1963 became obsessed with the idea that he could pull off a perfect assassination. Okay, hang on a second. This needs to be soaked in a little bit more. We're going to reread this paragraph here. This is important. And Perry Russo is correct. And he is telling the truth here to Salandria and these guys. I believe this is an accurate statement. The thing that puzzles me was David Ferry really that fucking arrogant? He was an arrogant guy. Of course he was. I mean, it's all over the Garrison files. But was he that arrogant that this guy, Perry Russo, who he only knows through Al Landry, this teenager who he's been molesting, and he tells him that they're going to kill the president, but everything else about this is perfect. Like, I can tell you with certainty, Clay Shaw sat on the board of Centre Mondial Commercial, which is a subgroup of Permindex, of which Clay Shaw also sat on the board of, which was a Mossad front company, which took its orders from Begin and Rabin and those fucking guys, right? So the information provided us, see here, now I have to refer back to my own little sayings, right? So when a witness provides information that they don't understand the significance of, then you can say that it is true. And here I'm battling with myself because of the significance of this paragraph. However, if I refer to my own research doctrine, then how can I deny it? Perry Russo is clearly providing information to Salandria and his other guys that he would not know the significance of. And what's the significance of this? Significance of this is, I can say with certainty, that the chain of command, so to speak, or the lineage of the assassination goes directly from Permindex and CMC to Lewis Bloomfield to Clay Shaw to David Ferry to Kerry Thornley. And then Kerry Thornley to Oswald, because Kerry Thornley clearly was an Oswald handler. Probably one of the more important Oswald handlers, at least in the time when he's in New Orleans, because of all the stuff I've already talked about with Jones Printing and whatnot. So if I stick to not be a hypocrite, I have to believe Perry Russo in his statements that all this is true, because I can prove otherwise. I can prove the lineage of the assassination otherwise, and his statements are doing nothing but supporting what I've already concluded, that the Oswald lookalike who went by Leon Oswald was Kerry Thornley. He was a dirty beatnik fucking hippie living with David Ferry. He was directly connected to Clay Shaw, who was the boss of the how do I say it? He was the broader CIA connection of David Ferry to the larger assassination plot, right? So yeah, this paragraph right here is fucking goddamn significant. He also repeated the previous story about Ferry telling him that he knew more about drugs and autopsies than any doctor in the world. And that Ferry had told him of how he had given this drug, which was similar to an aphrodisiac, to his roommate, and his roommate became very aggressive and had sexual relations with him. And said that he had also used this drug on Al Landry before. Okay, so this is another significant paragraph. He also repeated the previous story about Ferry's telling him that he knew more about drugs and autopsies than any doctor in the world. He also, that Ferry had told him of how he had given this drug, which was also similar to an aphrodisiac, to his roommate. So he's talking about Kerry Thornley, right? So not Oswald. He's talking about Kerry Thornley, who is his roommate, the dirty beatnik. And he gave him this drug. And then his roommate became very aggressive and had sexual relations with him. So he and Kerry Thornley did have sexual relations because of some aphrodisiac drug. And this reminds me of the beginning of the David Ferry file with the Dear Bastard letter. The Dear Bastard letter is so fucking important, and it's like never mentioned anywhere. The Dear Bastard letter, obviously a letter to Andrew Jerome Blackman, who I have come to determine was the seaman on the ship who was bringing in the heroin to Galveston that Rose Chermy and Sergio Arcacha and Emilio Santana were going to go and meet with on the way to fucking Dallas, right? But that's pretty much indicated to me clearly in that opening letter, the Dear Bastard letter. So yeah, that paragraph holds a lot of significance to me. My last question to Russo was something to this effect: is all that you are telling us true and to the best of your knowledge? And he said, yes, it is, as much as I can remember. Dr. Chetta then, in that name, Dr. Chetta, it's striking a nerve somewhere. I think because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it might have been in Hank Albarelli's book on the high strangeness. Dr. Chetta then informed us that he had been under sodium pentothal for over a half hour, and the administration of sodium pentothal was concluded at 4:10 p.m. To Jim Garrison from Frank Maloche. Information received by telephone from Charles Burns, St. Louis, Missouri, March 10th, 1967. Look, this is kind of a long story, but I was on the job working for Texas Instruments, on the day of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, about 30 minutes before it happened. I was walking between two buildings about a half a block off Lemon Avenue, which was the motorcade route. I was crossing the street, and I stepped out in the street, and I was hit by this gal in a Cadillac. License number, oh, I love this story. And a gal in a Cadillac, license number, Louisiana license number 941985. And her name was Jeanette Conforto with an M, actually. She was in Dallas on that day. She was employed by the Carousel Club, Jack Ruby. She made the statement to the company security people, since they were on the accident job, and they questioned her. She was in a hurry to get to New Orleans right away, and she made that statement. They asked if they could get a hold of her on the job at the Carousel Club, and she said no. The nightclub would not be open that night. That's a Friday night. Sounds kind of unusual. As it turns out, it wasn't open that night. But it was because of the assassination, and she had this fellow that was with her. I can't remember his name. It wasn't on the accident report. Okay, so this is a great story. And I'm glad I'm going through this because I'm going to elaborate a little more. Jeanette Conforto, obviously, that's Jada or Jada, depending on how you pronounce it. She was one of Jack Ruby's girls. She had left Dallas and had moved to New Orleans, where she drives a white Cadillac. One of the things that fucked me up in my research was that Clay Shaw had also been seen driving around in a white Cadillac. So we have two white Cadillac, both convertibles, by the way, in New Orleans with relevant people. And so I felt like there was some kind of significance with the fact that she was driving this white Cadillac and rushing to get out of fucking Dallas before the assassination, right? This happened between 10:30 and 11 o'clock in the morning. I have the other reports on this, which I don't think are included in here, but yes, so the important things here is that she said that the Carousel Club was going to be closed. It was closed because of the assassination, allegedly, right? But no, the real reason it was closed was because Jack fucking Ruby left to go to Galveston. And he was in Galveston bringing, from what I can tell, driving Andrew Jerome Blackman back to his boat because he was the seaman who came in on the merchant ship, the Mataranga, and he had to get back to it, right? So that's probably why they were closed. But the idea that she would know that it was closed beforehand, that's unusual. And who was the person with her? I can't remember his name. It wasn't on the accident report. They carried me over to a clinic to be x-rayed, and it all happened while I was in the clinic. They were actually with me at the clinic when it happened. It came over the radio, and he told me a long line of stuff that turned out not to be true. I don't know. I just thought you people might be interested in getting some of this information. This information, I understand, was given to the FBI by the company's security chief, but nothing ever came out about it, like in the Warren Report or anything. Was she with you at the clinic? Did she seem nervous or upset about the accident? She was almost hysterical. You think for the fact of hitting you? I don't know. She was cursing me for doing this. She went into a side building and used the telephone to call this guy, and he was there in about 2 minutes. He was somewhere close in another Cadillac. You don't know who this fellow was? I don't know, but the security chief does know because he got his name and everything. But it was never entered on the accident report because he wasn't actually involved. He said he lived right down the street in some apartment building. And they checked on that, and he didn't live there. Whoa. I need to remind everybody, Garrison put this in the Kerry Thornley file. Where did this happen? Interesting. It keeps saying Texas Estimates, but I know with certainty this is Texas Instruments. It was not Texas Estimates. He, the security chief, was working for Texas Instruments during this time, but he's now retired and he lives in Dallas. Security officer for Texas Instruments in Dallas has this accident report and has this information on file, and they have the statement he made on file documented before the assassination. It all sounds kind of fishy to me. I'm calling from St. Louis. I'm still working for Texas Instruments, but I'm up here on field service for McDonnell Aircraft. The number is 131PE12121 in St. Louis, Missouri, where I can be contacted during work hours, extension 3506. You can get the security office at the area code 214 Dallas AD 53111. You'll have to talk to the switchboard operator and ask for the security chief. These dots all along here. There was something here that's been erased. A map of the airport. it seems. Or a map of North Dallas, maybe, with some notation on it. Redbird Airport. Redbird Airport is circled on here. Let me see if I can read any of these notes scribbled at the bottom. Airfields encircled are these covered by Gurvich on 12767. Joseph Roland Hummel, room 710 YMCA. Okay, so now we have Garrison going to be going into investigating at the YMCA without even going any further. I can tell you that if this is in the Kerry Thornley file, it's because he believed that he was probably investigating Kerry Thornley, despite the reports of it having been Lee Harvey Oswald. Joseph Roland Hummel, room 710 YMCA, 605 North Irvay, Dallas, advised that he was presently employed at the Magnolia Tier Room, 1629 Pacific Street. He stated that he thought he had seen Lee Harvey Oswald in the Mayflower Coffee Shop in September of 1963. He advised he also believed that he had seen Jack Ruby on the sun deck at the YMCA during the summer of 1963. He said a fellow named Barney, last name unknown, who was a desk clerk at the YMCA, told him that Ruby was a member of the Y. Hummel advised that prior to coming to Dallas in April of 1961, he had lived in New Orleans and that he believed he first saw Lee Harvey Oswald during Mardi Gras of 1960 in the La Marina Cafe on Decatur Street, New Orleans. Hold on a second. So this is September of 1963. So yeah, Oswald was in New Orleans up until around September 26th or September 27th of September. Yeah, so that would make sense. Technically, I guess you could say that Oswald was living there at the time, so it's possible. However, remember, this is in the Kerry Thornley file. Hummel advised that prior to coming to Dallas in April of 61, he had lived in New Orleans and that he believed that he first saw Lee Harvey Oswald during Mardi Gras in 1960 at the La Marina Cafe on Decatur Street, New Orleans. He advised that he further believed that he had seen Oswald shopping in a grocery store on the corner of Magazine and Pelpomene. He further advised that he believed he had seen Oswald sometime in 1961 walking on Jackson and Magazine with a white male, sandy hair, about 5'8" or 5'9", who appeared to be of German extraction. Okay, remember in 1961, Oswald is living in the Soviet Union, right? So not Oswald. He advised in this regard, he is of German descent, and he claimed he had no trouble in distinguishing this nationality. Hummel claimed that he had been a source of information or an informant for the New Orleans Police and Customs Agency in New Orleans. He stated that he was working for Richard Dowling, and after Dowling went out of office, for James Garrison, presently district attorney. He said in particular he worked for Captain Barbarios. Hummel furnished information known to the agent which indicated he was acquainted with New Orleans area and further admitted he had been arrested by the New Orleans police for a crime against nature and indecent exposure. That means fucking kids or just being gay back then. Okay, so yes, the significance here is that this person this person has seen who they thought was Lee Harvey Oswald in 1963. They thought they saw him in 1961. And so if they're saying that, they're thinking that they're seeing the same person, right? But it's obviously not Oswald if Oswald was gone in 1961 in the Soviet Union. This being in the Kerry Thornley file, you can also kind of infer from that Kerry Thornley stayed at the YMCA at some point and was visited by Jack Ruby. That kind of makes a little bit more sense when you think of the Rose Cheramy statements where she said that Oswald and Ruby were bed buddies, right? It would make sense if it was Kerry Thornley. Seems we have a letter here. March 10th, 64. Dear Sirs, I regret to say that I find myself in a position where I cannot see. Where I cannot see. Any way of paying for the 1963 Thunderbird, which you financed for me. Aha! I know what this is. This is a letter from Igor Vaganov. Yep, Vaganov. It says here Baganov, but his name was Vaganov with a V, not a B. Okay. This is connecting some dots here. The person who they were referring to as B earlier in this document They were referring to Igor Vaganov, but with the B, Baganov, because that was an alias that he used. Okay, that makes a whole lot more sense. So this is a letter that fucking Vaganov... Okay, so... Note here that he talks about the 1963 Thunderbird, which you financed for me. So the bottom line is he returns the car. That's what this letter is. He returns the car. He parks it in a parking lot. Sorry about your fucking luck. Here's your car back. He bought the car just before the assassination. This is in March of 64, right? So 6 months after the assassination. But he bought it like a week or two before the assassination, right? So the problem is this is the vehicle that Kerry Thornley was seen in at what the fuck was the name of that service shop? Fuck, I can't remember. It's on the tip of my tongue. He's seen up at the service station, and when the guy approaches him, Mac Pate's garage. That's what it was. It was Mac Pate's garage, and when Kerry Thornley's sitting there in this red Thunderbird, and it's got the license plates of Carl Mathers, right? Friend of J.D. Tippett, gray Plymouth that David Ferry was driving around in, right? So the license plate swaparoo occurred between the gray Plymouth and this red 1963 Thunderbird, which was this is so good, which we have like all the proof in the world that it was Igor Vaganov who had fucking bought the car, and it was that car. He was also the third person inside Johnny Brewer's shoe store, along with Tommy Rowe and Johnny Brewer. So yeah, this is good stuff here. Let's see if he even extrapolates upon this. Again, this is in the Kerry Thornley file. Why would this be in the Kerry Thornley file? Well, obviously because this was the getaway vehicle for Kerry Thornley, and Garrison knew it. When I see shit like this in the Garrison files, it just fucking tells me Garrison knew what the fuck was going on. But you don't see Garrison ever writing about fucking body doubles or Kerry Thornley impersonating Oswald or none of that stuff. Ever. Signed I. Baganov. Unpublished commission documents on Baganov. On November 22nd, 1963, Larry Hotch, juvenile officer, Conroe, Texas Police Department, telephonically advised that 10 days ago he received information from Stan Kukowski of Village Green, Pennsylvania, telephone number Hubbard 56321, to the effect that his stepdaughter, name not recalled, departed with one Igor Vaganov, age 25, and an employee of General Electric Company, possibly from Village Green, Pennsylvania. Vaganov allegedly took his stepdaughter, who was 18 years of age, and headed up for Dallas, Texas, in a General Electric Corporation vehicle, where he claimed he had urgent business for the next week. The unknown girl has a sister in Conroe, a Mrs. Anthus, who allegedly received a telephone call on the night of November 21st, 1963, from the girl stating that she was with Vaganov at a motel in Dallas, the Oak Cliff Sunset Apartments, 815 Sunset Avenue, Dallas, Texas. The girl was hysterical and crying and claimed that Vaganov was up to something terrible, but would not elaborate. Officer Hawk stated that he had just received a telephone call from the girl's stepfather in Pennsylvania, wherein the stepfather claimed Vaganov is possibly the individual who assassinated the president. Commission document 320. Hopefully this continues on that. FBI Philadelphia investigated the case, and allegations implied by Kukowski's appeared to be unfounded. Case closed. Details of investigation, references made to MR of SAIC Lane, that's a special agent in charge, Lane Bertram, Houston, dated December 17, 1963. This report related that several calls were made by Mr. and Mrs. Stan Kukowski, Village Green, Pennsylvania, to juvenile officer Larry Hawk, or however the fuck you say that, Canoe, Texas, in which he was advised that their daughter left with Igor Vaganov and went to Dallas, Texas. He implied that Vaganov was up to something. On December 23, 1963, inquiry was made of the FBI Philadelphia to determine if they had conducted investigation in this case. S.A. Blaze Tomasani advised that Mrs. Kukowski had been interviewed, and it appears that she is upset because her 18-year-old daughter ran away with Vaganov and got married and went to Texas. Well, she's 18, so sorry about your fucking luck. She states that she does not like Vaganov, and there is something about him that she doesn't trust. It appears that FBI Philadelphia is discontinuing the allegations of Mrs. Kukowski and could establish no connection between this incident and the assassination. Mm-hmm. Disposition case closed. Hilarious. So, yeah, Vaganov provided that red fucking car, which we just saw. Let me fucking back up. This letter right here where he talks about he did not have any way of paying for the 1963 Thunderbird, which he then ditches in a parking lot and tells them that they can go get their own car back, right? That fucking red Thunderbird is the red Thunderbird driven by Kerry Thornley after he shuttled out of the back of the Texas Theater by Stringfellow and the other cocksuckers at the Dallas police who helped him escape. He's witnessed by fucking Bernie Hare from Bernard's Hobby House next door to the Texas Theater. He's seen by Butch Burroughs, who's the fucking Candyman, right? So, taken out the back of the theater. So that's what happens. Kerry Thornley gets to the Texas Theater, where he, at 12:36 p.m., enters without fucking paying for a ticket. That's what causes the whole fucking bullshit goes on there. I'm not going to get into that today. He then shuttled out the back by Stringfellow and a couple of other guys. He's then released and given a car owned by Igor Vaganov, which he then drives over to Mac Pate's garage, where the witnesses at Mac Pate's garage then place him in that vehicle. They get the license number, and the license plate number connects to the gray Plymouth owned by Carl Mathers, CIA guy, worked for Collins Radio, which was being driven around by David Ferry all fucking day. This is like not conspiracy. This is what fucking happened. We have the documents to goddamn show it. You know, it fucking drives me goddamn nuts that this hasn't come out already. I'm probably going to skip over most of this shit on Vaganov, because the story I just told you is exactly his involvement. Nothing more, nothing less. What is this? What is this? More stuff about Vaganov. It says Vaganov, but it was Vaganov. And Vaganov called this office. She is Igor Vaganov's second wife. She married him on November 7th in Dillon, South Carolina. Claims she is also looking for him. States she has not seen him since the first week in January. She is at present living at 1324 Renshaw, Crester, Pennsylvania. Something's redacted there. That space is not normal. Something is redacted. And she's employed there as a babysitter by Mrs. B. Boats, and the phone number is 494-7315. She states that Vaganov was interrogated by the FBI for 2 hours in Dallas the day Kennedy was shot. Interesting. No documents on that. And since then, a Mr. Lewis from the Chester office of the FBI has spoken to her in regards to this matter. I phoned Mr. J. Weinberg at the FBI office in Philadelphia. He was very nice, but would give me no information at all. He only verified that an agent Lewis worked out of the Chester office. In the course of my conversation with Mrs. Vaganov, she gave me information that on their way to Dallas, they made stops in redacted, and saw a redacted, and there's a whole bunch of redacted stuff here, Thomas Knox in Georgia and then somebody in Alabama. She could not give me any reason why they made these stops. She also states that Mitchell Kramer, attorney, handled Vaganov divorce from first wife Martha. When I first started to work this account, I contacted Kramer. From information I had picked up in the credit folder. He told me at the time his only contact with Vaganov was to try to handle his credit trouble and did not know him that much. Kramer is a partner of attorney Harrison, who stepped into the Frank Green deal, 30-313-117539, when we repoed his car, and who I contacted about Green's payments. She said Vaganov divorce was final in October. She also said she has information that his first wife is in Garland, Texas with her grandmother, Mrs. Markley, and that a Joe Hart with whom Vaganov worked at GECR told her that Vaganov would be Dallas, where George de Mohrenschildt banked. Definitely some interesting shit going on there. He told me there was activity on this checking account the 9th of January, but could not or would not tell me where the check was cashed, only stated that there was statements returned from, and then a whole bunch of shit redacted. Why would they redact that? This is where Ann Vaganov told me they were living in Dallas, Texas. She claimed he was carrying a .38 and a high-powered rifle when they went to Dallas. Ray checks Ann Vaganov out at her place of employment yesterday and verified story she told me. Page 3 out of 5. We phoned Thomas Knox he stated Baganoff was in his home on December 10th, and that in January, Baganoff's first wife phoned them from Garland, Texas. He gave me a phone number. I had our operator locate the address of the phone she picked up a listing for, Martha Vaganoff. We gave Allstate adjuster Dallas, see telegram, blah, blah, blah. Investigation of Baganoff conducted on behalf of Penn National Bank. I just want to remind everybody, we're not going through the Igor Vaganoff files. We're going through the Kerry Thornley files. Okay. Garrison fucking knew that Kerry Thornley was in the theater. He knew that he fled in the fucking red Thunderbird. He knew it was connected to Igor Vaganov. And so do I. And so should you. Mr. Igor Vaganov. This is on a subject investigation on a charge-off. Mr. Igor Vaganov purchased a 1962 Ford Thunderbird convertible from Ray McGowan Ford on August 6, 1963. The gross amount of the account was $3485.84, having 36 monthly payments of $96.82. Jesus Christ. I'll take 3 of them, please. The first payment was due September 20th, 1963. There has been 1 installment made. The last was October 15th, 1963. Since then, the account has been a constant problem. My first experience with this account was October 10th, 1963. At the time, Baganoff was a first payment default. He was employed by General Electric Credit Corporation at their branch office in Garfield Avenue, Pennsylvania as a credit manager. I contacted him by phone and claimed that the reason he was late due to an adjustment he wanted from the dealer. I insisted on payment, and he remitted one in the mail by October 15th, 1963. In the latter part of October, I once more contacted him at his job. He promised payment by October 28th, 1963. In the first week in November, I called his office and spoke to the manager. He was evasive and would not give me any information other than Vaganov left their employ October 28th, 63. When I tried to make connections with GECC, Credit Corporation Supervisory Office, was informed a person that could help me was out of town. We checked out 1116 7th Avenue, Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, but could not come up with any leads at all. And I could make no contact at GE Supervisory Office. I ran a credit check through Philadelphia Credit Bureau and came up with a long list of delinquent accounts. On December 7th, 63, Dick Barone, automobile dealer, phoned us for a payoff on our open account. At that time, they claimed he would be able to give them a down payment of $1,200 if we would buy the deal, but we refused. They gave his address as 1116 7th Avenue in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, and his employment at GE. So this is nothing more than Garrison's gathering of documents, which showed that GE had done an investigation into Vaganov and had thus been able to verify where Vaganov was at different times, different addresses he was using, who he was married to, that shit is super important when it gets down to investigations at all. You want to know everything about a person. Everything. Including the genealogy. Let me see. I can probably skip all this. All right. So, other individuals or organizations involved or interviewed. This looks like a DOJ. So this is an FBI document titled Lee Harvey Oswald, Internal Security R. Cuba. Oh, there's a lot of good documents reference Oswald that are marked Internal Security R. Cuba. Synopsis: Martin Samuel Abelow, an employee of Lockheed Aircraft, Sunnyvale, California, advised that to the best of his recollection, he never met Lee Harvey Oswald. Details. On May 28, 64, Martin Samuel Abelow, who was employed by Lockheed Aircraft, Sunnyvale, California, who resides at 2727 Midcourt, Palo Alto, California, furnished the information set forth below to Special Agent Douglas G. Allen and John P. McHugh. Abelow advised that approximately 1 year ago, he was working in Houston, Texas, and took a vacation trip to New Orleans, Louisiana. While in New Orleans, he visited the United States aircraft carrier, which was docked there at the time, and while waiting to board this carrier, he observed a young man distributing leaflets to the waiting crowd. The leaflets were of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Abelow stated he has no idea who this young man was and that he had never met Lee Harvey Oswald to the best of his recollection and his knowledge. He noted that he did travel to Mexico City around the 1st of July 1963 for a vacation trip and say that he is unable to recall meeting anyone in Mexico City who would remotely fit the description of Lee Harvey Oswald. All right, so this is May 28th of 64. He advised a year ago, so in May of 63, while working in Houston, he took a vacation in New Orleans. May of 63? No, I don't think so, because the flyers weren't printed till July of 63 that we know of. And it was August 9th that Oswald had his incident on the street with Carlos Bernier. So, yeah, this is not Lee Harvey Oswald. And there were no flyers for fucking Fair Play for Cuba Committee being handed out this far back by Oswald at all. Therefore, this must have been something completely different. And obviously, it being in the Kerry Thornley files, we have fucking Garrison believing that this was Kerry Thornley once again. All right, so we seem to be back to Roy Tell. Roy Tell of Zanini Street, Metairie, Louisiana, appeared at the New Orleans office of the FBI and advised that he had been in Civil Air Patrol at Moisant Airport from approximately September 55 to January of 58. He said the name Oswald is vaguely familiar to him, but he could not place him from the recent photo of Oswald in the newspapers. Tell was shown a photograph appearing in New Orleans States item of November 23, 1963, page 1, which was a photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald taken in approximately 1954. Tell, upon looking at this photograph, says he believes Oswald was in the CAP at the same time he was, but he cannot be sure of this. Tell said that Tell, was a drill sergeant in 56 and 57, and it was during this time that he might have seen Oswald. He said if his memory is correct and that the individual he is thinking of is identical to Oswald, he remembers seeing him only 3 to 5 times at any of their meetings. Tell could furnish no information regarding the background of Oswald, nor could he say who his friends might have been while in the CAP. Tell said the following individuals were in the CAP at the same time as Oswald, and that they may possibly know something more regarding Oswald. Anthony Atzenhofer, John Saravolo, Joe Lisbon, Larry Anderson, Oliver St. P., Richard Marshall, Gene Marshall. So I've really come to gain so much greater appreciation for Garrison and what he did, and not just in how he stacked his files, but the information that he gathered. Like, what was he able to determine from one man? From one man, he was able to put a huge chunk of Oswald's history into perspective, right? November 29th, 63, FBI document, Lois Weston, Aircraft Registration Branch, Federal Aviation, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, reviewed her files under registration number 8293K and advised this registration number was issued to a Stinson 150 aircraft with serial number 1081293. This aircraft was registered to David W. Ferry, 1302 Clay Street, Kenner, Louisiana, on May 8th, 1947. The latest registration records in file is Ferry as the registered owner. His last address recorded in the file is 704 Airline Park Boulevard, Kenner, Louisiana. Weston advised that an application for airworthiness certification dated April 7th, 1961 is contained in the file, and this certificate, according to regulations, would be valid as long as the aircraft is operated in accordance with operating regulations. There was no particular expiration date listed on this certificate, and there was no information available in FAA files which would indicate that this aircraft is no longer airworthy. Weston added, however, that in the event Ferry had not complied with FAA regulations, his aircraft would not be airworthy, but it is not necessary that this information be recorded in the FAA files. So this is an interesting little tidbit, because this is showing that David Ferry's last known certificate of airworthiness was back in April 7th of 61, right? So Garrison was digging into Ferry to see if he had flown into Dallas or out of Dallas or what his deal was. And so, obviously, Ferry flew into Dallas. We know this because of Jack Martin, who I believe was not Jack Martin, who I believe was Jean-Pierre Lafitte, who rats on David Ferry and tells the FBI that David Ferry flies into Dallas 2 days before the assassination. Now, since David Ferry ends up leaving Dallas in a light blue Ford Falcon station wagon,
how did the airplane that he flew in get back to New Orleans? Well, it didn't go to New Orleans. It went to Shreveport. And it was flown back by Joe Cody, who was an associate of Jack Ruby, who was nephew of Kenneth Cody. I'm not going to get into that shit. We'll talk about it another time. But, yeah. So, I'm pretty sure I know exactly what happened with fucking Ferry's airline. He flew it in, and then it was flown out by Joe Cody. So, yeah. Let me skip past this. Mr. Lawrence Bright, owner New Orleans Printing Company, 811 Camp Street, advised that he knew of Lee Oswald. He said that 3 or 4 months ago, 2 Cuban acquaintances of his, Cuban acquaintances of Oswald. Oh, really? Came into his shop and were highly incensed in view of the fact that they had just come from in front of the International Trade Mart and seen Oswald passing out pro-Castro handbills. Bright said that both of these men were Cuban refugees, and neither of them spoke English, but had become very angry with Oswald and with that what he was doing because they had both lost everything as a result of Castro coming to power. But the New Orleans Printing Company was not where the fucking flyers were printed. They were printed at Jones Printing, Douglas Jones. Bright said that he and his 2 Cuban acquaintances headed to the International Trade Mart to see what was going on. Bright said Oswald was gone when they got to the Trade Mart. Bright said that he saw Oswald on the street in New Orleans one other occasion, but he could not remember exactly when. Bright said he did not know the full names of the 2 Cuban refugees who had come into his shop, but one of them named Raphael, who was a sailor and whom he thought sailed out of Mobile, Alabama. Bright said that a Father Anthony at Ozanam Inn, 829 Camp Street, is acquainted with Raphael and could identify him. Bright said the second Cuban is a tall blonde who was employed by the Rice Candy Company, 419 Decatur Street. Bright said he could not recall this man's name. Bright went on to say that he had spent a considerable time in Cuba and was fluent in Spanish. He stated these 2 Cubans who had come to him were friends of his, even though he did not know their names. So, just some clarification here. The incident with Oswald on the street with Carlos Bernier was on August the 9th of 1963. And this printing place was not where they were printed. They were printed at Jones Printing. So I don't know what the fuck that thing has anything to do with anything. You find lots of that in the Kennedy files. All 5 million fucking pages of them. You know, I'd say out of the 5 million pages of Kennedy documents, you could probably sum up the whole goddamn investigation in like 200,000 documents. 200,000 could tell the whole story. Easy. With it, definitely. And we already have them. Gilberto Gutierrez, home address 3902 Kansas Avenue, Kenner, Louisiana, was contacted at his place of employment, United Fruit Company. That's fucking interesting. United Fruit. 325 St. Charles Avenue, after being advised of agent's identity, furnished the following voluntary information. He stated that he recalls being given a handbill at the International Trade Mart, 124 Camp Street, sometime in August of 1963, but after glancing at the contents of the handbill, immediately discarded it. He stated that he does not recall who gave him the handbill, nor does he recall how many persons were passing out handbills at the time. Gutierrez stated that he did not remain in the area of the International Trade Mart after being given the handbill and does not recall seeing anyone that he recognized in the area of the Trade Mart during the period of the time that he passed by it. Gutierrez was shown photographs which were taken at the International Trade Mart during the period of time that Lee Harvey Oswald was passing out handbills in the area. He stated that he did not recognize any of the individuals appearing in these photographs other than Lee Harvey Oswald. He stated that he was able to recognize Oswald only because of the wide coverage on television being given to Oswald regarding the assassination of President John Kennedy. Okay, I can't really read that. It looks like Mrs. Eric Watcher, 418 Shelley, Dallas, Texas, stated she's employed in the cutting room for Miller and Rendazzo, a dress factory on the third floor of the Daltex building. Oh, this should be interesting. Also on the third floor of the Daltex building was Morris Jaffe's Maryland Belt Company. On November 22nd, 1963, she and another employee ate lunch at 12 noon and left the lunchroom about 12:20 p.m. to go down on the street to see President Kennedy ride by. They walk out of the front door of the building, crossed the street, and stepped at a point on the east side of Houston Street, about 50 or 60 feet south of the curb of Elm Street. So they're in the Daltex building, and they ate in the lunchroom between 12 and 12:20. And then they walk out onto Elm Street. They stop next to the curb to await the passing of the president. While standing there, she started looking around and looked over toward the Texas School Book Depository building. She noticed a man wearing a brown suit and a very dark shirt leaning out of the window. Out of the window of the third floor, somewhere about the middle window of the third floor. Shortly after this, a man in the crowd across the street to the west of where she was standing apparently had an epileptic seizure and had an ambulance come by. They're talking about Jerry. The fuck was his last name? I don't recall. Kid's name was Jerry something. Shortly after the ambulance left, she looked back towards the Texas School Book Depository building and saw a man standing on either the fourth or fifth floor in the southwest corner. This would be the most easterly window of either the fourth or fifth floors of the windows of the south side of the building, which faces toward Elm Street. This man had the window open, was standing up, leaning out the window with both hands extended outside the window ledge. In his hands, this man was holding a rifle with a barrel pointed downward, and the man was looking south on Houston Street. The man was wearing a white shirt and had blonde or light brown hair. She realized at the time that this man noticed the man there was a few moments. She had not noticed the man there a few moments previous when she looked toward the building and thought that apparently there were guards everywhere. The rifle had a short barrel and seemed large around the stock end of the rifle. Her impression was that the gun was a machine gun. She noticed nothing like a telescopic sight on the rifle or a leather strap or sling on the rifle. She said she knows nothing about rifles or guns of any type, but thought that the rifle was different from any she had ever seen. This man was standing in about the middle of the window. In the same window to the left of this man, she could see a portion of another man standing by the side of this man with a rifle. This other man was standing erect and his head above the open portion of the window. As the window was very dirty, she could not see the head of this second man. She is positive this window was not as high as the sixth floor. This second man was apparently wearing a brown suit coat. And only thing she could see was the right side of the man from about the waist to the shoulders. Almost immediately after noticing this man with the rifle and the other man was standing beside him, someone in the crowd said, "Here they come," and she looked to her left, looking south on Houston to see the presidential party. As soon as President Kennedy's car passed where she was standing, she and Mrs. Springer turned away and started walking north toward Elm Street. At about the time they reached the curb at Elm Street, she heard a loud report and thought it was fireworks. There was a pause after this first report, then a second and third report almost at the same time. Then there was a pause followed by at least one and possibly more reports. The noise seemed to come from up in the air, but she never looked up in any direction. When the second report sounded, she decided it was gunfire, and so she and Mrs. Springer started diagonally across the street towards the Texas School Book Depository building. About the time she got across the street, she heard someone yell that the president had been hit. She stopped a moment and listened to the police radio on a motorcycle, then returned to the building across the street where she works. She returned to her job about 12:45 p.m. Mrs. Pearl Stringer, 8218 Elkington Circle, Dallas, Texas, telephone EX1-1803, advised she is employed in the cutting room for Miller and Rendazzo on the third floor of the Daltex Mart building, 501 Elm Street, Dallas, Texas. On November 22nd, she was with another employee, Miss Carolyn Walter. She left the building where they work after they hurriedly ate lunch about 12:15 p.m. to see the presidential parade. They walked out of the building, crossed Elm Street, and walked south on Houston Street on the east side of Houston Street, stopping just south of a signpost. They stood there for about 15 minutes waiting for the parade. During that time, she looked around at the crowd, but she never looked up above the ground floor or the Texas School Book Depository, located diagonally across the street from where she was standing. She recalled some commotion across the street from her, and an ambulance came and carried a man away. She heard a police officer say that the man carried away in the ambulance had an epileptic seizure. Jerry Belknap, that was his name, Jerry Belknap. After the presidential party passed her and turned the corner going west on Elm Street, she heard what she thought was a shot. At first, she thought it was some kind of salute, but this shot was followed by two more. She recalled that after the first shot, there was a pause. Then two more shots were fired close together. She and Mrs. Walter ran across the street for a moment toward the Texas School Book Depository building to see if they could see anything down toward the Elm Street underpass. They could, but they could not. So they returned to the building where they work. Mrs. Springer said she noticed no one standing in the windows on the upper floors of the Texas School Book Depository building, and Mrs. Walter did not mention to her anything about seeing a man standing in a window of that building holding a rifle. Mrs. Maria Vidalis, nicknamed Tony, Secretary Juvenile Bureau, Dallas Police Department, furnished the following information. She speaks Spanish fluently and is known in the Dallas Police Department as an interpreter of the Spanish language. She is also known among the Catholic priests in the Mexican section of Dallas as an interpreter and frequently does interpreting work for them. On November 26, 1963, she received a phone call at her office at the Dallas Police Department from a boy whom she would judge to be Texas-born of Mexican parents, asking her if she were the interpreter. When she replied in the affirmative, he told her that a lady wants to talk to her and turned the phone over to this woman. She then talked to this woman for a few minutes and arranged for the woman to call her back at her residence since she was just getting off work and needing to go home to take care of family. For dinner, she received a call at her residence at approximately 7:15 p.m. from the same woman. She received another call from this woman about 12:15 a.m. on November 27, 1963, and again about 11:30 a.m. and about 1:30 p.m. on November 27, 1963. The woman has given her name, her address, and her phone number, or any of this information, or has never given her information. This woman insists, however, that she is afraid to identify herself since she lives in fear of her life if she is caught talking. She is employed as a maid for a family in Dallas. This family apparently consists of a man who does not speak Spanish but does speak some other foreign language, and a woman whom was born in Mexico and who speaks both Spanish and English, and probably two small children. This woman asked her to be certain that the investigators conducting the investigation into the matter involving Lee Harvey Oswald not stop their investigations. She stated that Oswald had been at that residence and that there are many more involved, both near and far. Mrs. Vidalis stated that she expects this woman to call her again if she is endeavoring to gain her confidence. In order to identify and locate her as soon as she is able to do this, she will notify the FBI in order that this woman may be interviewed. The woman speaks no English whatsoever, but speaks what Mrs. Vidalis considers to be Spanish of a high-class, well-educated person. She estimated the age of this woman is approximately 40. Mrs. Henrietta Vargas, Nee Garcia, 5011 Capitol Street, was interviewed in the presence of her attorney, Lawrence P. Hochberg, 700 South Lynn Life Building. Mrs. Vargas stated she is presently employed by Mrs. McKelb Sportswear, 501 Elm Street. Aha. All right, so I'm going to tell this story here, and then this is a great one. Very important. And then we're going to call it a day. So let's go ahead and get through this. November 25th, 1963. All right, so this woman works at McKelvey Sportswear, 501 Elm Street, which is right next to the book depository. She further advised on November 19th, 1963 at 4:10 p.m., while en route to a parking lot located directly west of the Texas School Book Depository on Elm Street, she and Francis Hernandez, Annex Street, Dallas, and Josie Salinas, Irving, Texas, observed two cars parked near the exit lane of the parking lot. She described one as a 1955 or 1956 Buick, which is light in color. She stated that she did not notice the other car, but was advised by Francis Hernandez it was a new model compact. She stated that the man in the Buick was an older man, perhaps age 40 or more, 5'7" or 5'8", build husky, Jack Ruby. She stated that the man in the small car was not entirely visible to her and that she cannot describe him except that he was of slender build. She further stated she observed the older man open the trunk of his car and remove a rifle, which she noticed had a telescopic sight affixed thereto. She stated the older man gave the rifle to the younger man, who put it in the smaller car, and then both got in and drove away. Mrs. Vargas feels the photographs she has seen of Jack Leon Ruby are perhaps identical to the older man whom she noticed giving the rifle to the younger man on November 19th, 1963. David Torres advised he resides at 3619 Almazan, Dallas, Texas. He stated he had a discussion with one Conrad Galvin, a friend of his, sometime after the shooting of President Kennedy, and they discussed various phases of the matter. Torres recalls that he told Galvin that 2 or 3 girls of Spanish descent who work in the building at 501 Elm Street had seen 2 men with a rifle outside the Texas School Book Depository building on Tuesday, November 19th, 1963. They do not know Lee Oswald to his knowledge. At least they do not state they saw Oswald with the gun. And he stated he does not know how the rumor got started that they saw Oswald with a gun on November 22nd, 1963. Torres advised that the discussion came up between the girls and himself after they told him that they had been interviewed by the FBI. Torres advised that he was the man that told Galvin originally about this incident, and apparently the whole story got mixed up. He advised he does not know and never even seen Oswald or Jack Ruby. Okay, so that incident here will connect to another incident which happens on November 20th, where 3 men are seen. One of them resembles Oswald. The other one, definitely Jack Ruby. The other one, okay, so this is in the Kerry Thornley file, but if this is dealings at the Texas School Book Depository, this is going to be William Seymour. From what I can tell, I can't put Kerry Thornley anywhere near the Texas School Book Depository, and he was most certainly not in Dealey Plaza when the assassination went down. He was in Oak Cliff, most likely just hiding out somewhere until he is involved in the shooting of J.D. Tippit, shortly after 1 o'clock. So, but we talked about that a couple days ago, I think. But yeah, this incident, very important. This is going to be Jack Ruby, and he's somehow turning a rifle, probably the Carcano rifle, over to William Seymour, who was at the book depository, right? So William Seymour, in my opinion, was working at the book depository as Oswald. Oswald didn't work at the fucking book depository. I fucking challenge anyone out there, show me any evidence whatsoever that Oswald worked at the book depository. There's nothing there. There's no evidence at all. So... But yes, that's going to do it for today. We are on page 64. We will begin tomorrow on page 65. And that will be all for today. Let me see if there's any questions. Doesn't look like it. There never are. And all right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.